The battlefield is chaos. Plasma fire streaks through the air as the human soldier sprints forward, his boots pounding against the scorched metal, ground his breath steady, his focus. Unshaken beside him, the alien girl struggles to keep up her 4 legs, moving in quick, desperate bursts. Her kind is fast, agile, but not built for endurance. Not like him, she gasps, dodging a stray blast, the air sizzling with energy, her heart pounding against her ribs. We have to fall back, she shouts, her voice barely cutting through the roar of explosions. The human glances back, eyes sharp, calculating. Fall back, he repeats, as if the very idea is foreign to him. His lips curl into something that is not quite a smile, not quite a snarl, not yet. He pivots without breaking stride, lifting his weapon, firing in one fluid motion. A direct hit, an enemy soldier is flung backward, their armor crackling with energy as they collapse. Ahead, the enemy blockade looms, a reinforced wall of steel and alien tech, meant to stop anything from breaking through, except humans don't stop. Another explosion rocks the ground behind them. The alien girl stumbles her balance, thrown. She barely manages to stay upright, but the human surges forward faster, like he's racing the blast wave itself. He reaches the blockade, and instead of looking for cover, he leaps at full speed, his armored shoulder crushing into the metal barrier with enough force to send a dent rippling through it. The alien girl skids to a halt, eyes widening. Her kind would have broken upon impact, bones shattered, internal organs crushed. But he only grunts, shaking his head, dazed, but still standing, his body built for violence in ways she can barely comprehend. But then, before she can call out, before she can warn him, she sees the shadow moving above. Sniper. Her mouth opens to shout, but she's too late. The crack of a high-powered rail rifle splits the air. The human's body jerks the force, sending him crashing sideways, slamming into a steel column. She watches in horror as his arm bends at an angle that no limb should bend, his body crumpling against the wreckage. A cold dread settles in her stomach. She's seen this before she knows what comes next. Human resilience is legendary, but even they have their limits. No one walks away from that kind of injury, no one. But then the human stirs. A groan escapes him, low, frustrated. He blinks, dazed, his expression twisting, not in pain, but in irritation, as if his body failing him is just an inconvenience. And then, to her absolute shock, he lifts his broken arm, examines it like it's a malfunctioning weapon, and without a moment's hesitation, he grips his own wrist, takes a deep breath, and wrenches the limb back into place. A sickening crack echoes through the battlefield. The alien girl's vision tunnels. She stares, unable to process what just happened. The pain alone should have sent him into shock, should have left him screaming, writhing, unconscious at the very least. But instead, he just exhales, flexes his fingers, rolls his shoulder like he's testing the joint, and then stands as if nothing happened. Her breathing turns shallow, her mind scrambling for an explanation. No, this isn't possible. This shouldn't be possible. Her kind of fragile injuries like that would take weeks to heal, even with advanced medical treatment. Yet here he is brushing himself off, retrieving his weapon, like all he did was shake off a mild discomfort. He catches her, staring, his expression unreadable. What he asks flatly, like he doesn't understand why she's looking at him, like he's some kind of nightmare given form. She tries to speak, but her tongue is heavy, her vision is blurring, her body sways. This isn't real, it can't be real. She's dreaming, she has to be dreaming. And then the ground tilts beneath her. Her limbs feel weightless, the roaring battle. Sounds become distant, muffled, like she's sinking underwater, her mind desperately trying to hold onto reality, but it slips through her fingers like sand. The last thing she sees before everything goes dark is the human tilting his head slightly, his face unreadable, and then her world fades into nothing. Her mind swims in darkness, weightless, drifting. Nothing makes sense. The last thing she remembers is the human snapping his own bones back into place. The sound still echoes in her head, sharp, wet, unnatural. Her kind cannot do that. No species she knows can do that. But he did. She saw it, and then she felt her body give up, her thoughts spiraling into the abyss. But now something shakes her, something solid, something warm. A rough voice cuts through the void. Come on, wake up. We don't have time for this. Her eyes snap open, her vision blurs, and then focuses. The first thing she sees is the human, his face inches from hers, his brow furrowed, not in concern, But in impatience, his armored hand grips her shoulder firm steady. She realizes she is lying on the cold metallic ground. Her body feels light, her limbs weak, her pulse still frantic with the memory of what she saw. "You fainted," he says flatly, his tone almost annoyed. Her brain struggles to catch up. Everything rushes back: the battlefield, the explosion, the sniper, the way his bones had bent, the way he had fixed himself like it was nothing. Her breath catches, her limbs trembled. She pushes herself up, but he keeps his grip firm, steadying her before she topples again. "You're in shock," he states, like he's diagnosing a mechanical issue, not a living being. She shakes her head. No, she tries to speak, but the words feel distant. How did you do that?" She finally manages. Her voice is hoarse, disbelief still thick in every syllable. He blinks, then glances at his arm, flexing his fingers. "What is?" he asks casually, as if realigning his own shattered bones is as mundane as reloading a weapon. "Yes, this," she nearly shouts, her composure cracking. "What do you mean this? You should be writhing on the ground. You should be in agony. You should be dead." His mouth twitches, not quite a smirk, but something close. He stretches his arm, then shrugs. "Human biology, we bounce back fast." No, she grips her own head, as if trying to steady her thoughts. "That is not normal. That is not biology. That is something else, something terrifying. Her people need advanced regeneration pods. For even minor fractures, they would be bedridden for weeks for something like what happened to him." But he is standing, walking, fighting like nothing happened. Her heart pounds faster, the way he speaks, the way he moves, no hesitation, no doubt, as if pain itself is optional for him. He sighs, shaking his head, like he has had this conversation before with others who couldn't understand. "No time for a biology lesson. We need to move." He gestures toward the battlefield, the sounds of distant combat still echoing through the ruined structures. She wants to argue, wants to demand answers, but survival comes first. She takes a breath, forces herself to stand fully. The human steps back, watching, as if evaluating her recovery rate. Her pride flares, and she straightens her spine, determined not to show weakness, not in front of him, not after what she saw. He nods, satisfied. "Let's go, then stay close, and try not to pass out this time." Her jaw tightens, her instincts scream at her to challenge him, to demand respect. But beneath that irritation is something else, something cold creeping under her skin. Fear, not of him exactly, but of what he represents. They move through the wreckage, his movements precise, efficient, every step calculated. She follows, trying to match his pace, her mind still racing with questions, with disbelief, with a growing realization that whatever she thought she knew about humans was wrong. Her mind is still spinning, her body still unsteady, but she forces herself to move. The human is already ahead, weaving through the battlefield, like he has done this 1,000 times, without hesitation, without doubt, without fear. She wants to ask him to slow down, wants to demand an explanation, wants to scream at him for breaking every law of biology she understands. But there is no time. Gunfire erupts from the left, plasma bolts streaking through the air, scorching the metal walls. She flinches, diving behind cover. But the human doesn't stop. He moves forward, fast, brutal, efficient. His rifle raises, his aim steady. He fires once, twice, 3 times, each shot finding its mark. The enemy soldiers drop before they even realize what hit them. She watches in stunned silence. His broken arm, the one that should still be useless, grips his weapon like nothing happened, like it was never injured at all. Her stomach twists. There is something wrong, something unnatural about the way he moves, the way he fights, the way he simply refuses to acknowledge pain, like it is beneath him. The human glances back, his expression unreadable. "You good?" he asks, like she has just witnessed the impossible again. She nods quickly, too quickly. She pushes herself up, forcing her legs to move. They press forward, moving through the crumbling ruins of the battlefield. Every instinct in her body screams at her to run, to get as far away from him as possible, because nothing should be able to do what he does. But another part of her, the part that has survived war, the part that understands power, tells her to stay close. Ahead, an enemy turret swivels toward them. She sees it first. Her breath catches. It locks onto them. They are done. There is no cover, no escape route, no time to think. But the human doesn't stop. He sprints straight toward it. Before she can even warn him, she expects him to dive, roll, take cover. But he does none of those things. Instead, he throws his rifle aside, reaching for something at his belt, a small round device. He yanks the pin, and hurls it forward with terrifying accuracy. The grenade lands perfectly beneath the turret. A heartbeat later, it detonates, sending a shockwave through the air. Metal fragments rain down the turret, groans, tilts, and then collapses in a heap of sparking debris. She stares at him, breathing hard. "You are insane," she says before she can stop herself. He smirks. "Not the first time I've heard that. This is not normal." She snaps, her fear bubbling into frustration. "You don't feel pain, you don't hesitate, you run straight into death, like you don't even care." He looks at her for a long moment, his gaze steady, calculating. Then he shrugs. "Caring doesn't change anything. You die, or you don't. Pain is just a signal the body sends to the brain. You can ignore it if you have to." Her blood runs cold. "Just ignore it," she repeats, like it's that simple. "It is that simple," he says, turning away. "Come on, we are not done yet." She does move. Her hands clench into fists. She wants to believe he is lying, that he is exaggerating, but deep down she knows he isn't. She remembers the stories, the legends of human soldiers surviving impossible odds, pushing forward when any other species would have collapsed. But she never believed them, not until now, not until she saw it with her own eyes. The human is already moving again, his rifle back in his hands, his body a machine of war. She swallows hard and follows her heart pounding in her chest. Whatever humans are, they are not like any other species in this galaxy, and for the first time she wonders if that should terrify her more than anything else. Her legs burn, her lungs ache, but she keeps moving. She has to. The human is already ahead, moving with relentless speed and precision. He does not slow, he does not hesitate, he does not seem to tire. She forces herself to match his pace, even as her mind struggles to process everything that has happened, everything she has seen. The battlefield is still alive with fire and chaos, bodies scattered across the ruins, smoke rising from shattered structures. Every few seconds, a distant explosion shakes the ground. She is used to war, used to conflict. But this is something different, because this time she is not just fighting beside an ally, she is fighting beside something she cannot understand, something that should not exist. The human slides to a stop near a fallen structure, his eyes scanning their surroundings, calculating. His expression is unreadable, always unreadable. She stops beside him, gripping her weapon tightly, her hands slick with sweat, when now she asks, her voice low despite the noise around them. He tilts his head, listening, processing. Then he nods forward. "Enemy stronghold. Is that way we take it? We end this battle before they can call reinforcements." Her stomach twists. Taking a stronghold with just the two of them is suicide. She knows it, he knows it, but he says it like it's nothing, like it is just another obstacle to break through, like his own survival is an afterthought. "We can't do that," she says before she can stop herself. He turns to her, his expression unreadable again. "Why not?" "Because it's impossible," she snaps before realizing how useless those words are to him. He exhales through his nose, almost like a laugh. "Nothing is impossible. You just make it impossible in your head." She stares at him, her frustration boiling over. "Do you even feel fear? Do you even care if you live or die?" His eyes meet hers, and for the first time since she met him, she sees something flicker there, something old, something dark, but it is gone before she can grasp it. "Not dying is preferable," he says finally. Then he stands, stretches his arms, and moves forward without another word. Her fists clench. She wants to scream at him, she wants to demand answers, but there is no time, no choice. She curses under her breath and follows him, forcing her legs to keep moving. They move through the ruins, silent as shadows. The human leads the way, his steps precise, his focus absolute. She watches him carefully. His movements are different from anyone she has ever known. There is no wasted energy, no hesitation. His body is a weapon honed to perfection, his mind a machine that calculates risk without fear. They reach the outer perimeter of the stronghold. Towering steel barriers guard the entrance. Armed sentries patrol the walls. Turrets scan the ruins, looking for movement. She swallows hard. There is no way through, not without being seen, not without being torn apart. But the human is already moving. He crouches low, his fingers tapping against his wrist device, scanning, analyzing. Then he smirks. Found an opening. She frowns. There is no opening. "There is now," he says, standing. He pulls something from his belt, a small device, sleek and unfamiliar. He presses a button and hurls it forward. The moment it lands, an electromagnetic pulse ripples outward. The turrets flicker, the lights dim for just a second. But a second is all he needs. Move, he says, and then he is running. She does not think, she just follows her instincts, screaming at her that this is madness. But her body moves anyway. They reach the outer wall, and he grabs the edge, pulls himself up with terrifying ease. She hesitates, but his hand shoots down, grabbing her wrist and yanking her up as if she weighs nothing. The second they land, an enemy soldier turns, sees them. But before he can react, the human's knife is already in his throat. Silent, clean, efficient, she watches as the body crumples, her heart pounding. No hesitation, no remorse, he is already moving again. Fear prickles at the edges of her mind, but deeper than that, beneath the terror, something else is stirring. Something like awe. She barely has time to process what just happened. The enemy soldier is still collapsing, blood pooling beneath him. But the human is already moving forward, his steps silent, his breathing steady. He moves like a predator, like he was made for this, like this is just another routine mission and not a death sentence. She swallows back the lump in her throat and follows her pulse pounding in her ears. They weave through the stronghold, sticking to the shadows. Her every instinct tells her to slow down, to move cautiously, but the human does not hesitate. He knows exactly where to go, exactly how to move. She wonders if he even considers failure, or if that word simply does not exist in his mind. Ahead, two more guards round a corner, their weapons raised. They spot them, their eyes widening, her muscles tense. She reaches for her rifle, but before she can even lift it, the human is already on them. He moves so fast, she barely sees him. Close the distance. His first strike is brutal, a knife straight into the first soldier's chest. Before he even has time to react, the second guard stumbles back, raising his weapon. But the human grabs his arm, twists it, snaps it in a way that makes her stomach churn, and then slams him against the wall, a sharp strike to the throat, silencing him instantly. She stares at the two bodies, her mind racing. She has fought before, she has killed before, but never like this, never so quickly, so efficiently. She looks at the human, his expression remains the same, calm, focused, like none of this matters. "You're hesitating," he says, without looking at her. Her jaw tightens. "I am not used to this," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. He finally turns, his eyes locking onto hers. "You think too much. Thinking gets you killed." Her breath catches in her throat. He says it like it is obvious, like it is a universal truth. She wants to argue, wants to tell him that strategy and planning matter, but she knows he does not see it that way. He moves forward without another word, and she has no choice but to follow. They reach the next hallway, the sound of footsteps echoing from the other side. She grips her weapon, ready this time. She will not hesitate, she will not slow him down, she will prove she belongs here. But then she sees him rolling his shoulder, stretching his arm, the same arm that was broken not long ago. Her throat goes dry. "How is your arm not broken anymore?" He glances at it, flexes his fingers. "Because I fixed it." "That's not how bones work," she snaps before she can stop herself. He raises an eyebrow, says nothing, but the way he looks at her tells her everything. He does not care how things are supposed to work, he only cares that they do. Before she can press further, an alarm blares through the stronghold, red lights flashing over the walls. Enemy reinforcements are coming. Their element of surprise is gone. But the human only sighs, rolling his neck, like this is an inconvenience and not a death sentence. "Stay behind me," he says, low and firm. She almost argues, but something in his voice, something absolute, stops her. She grips her weapon tighter, nodding once. The doors at the end of the hall slide open. Enemy soldiers flood in their weapons. Raised, she barely has time to aim before the human is already moving, sprinting straight into the fight. Gunfire erupts, plasma bolts scorch the walls. But he does not slow. He weaves through the chaos, his blade flashing, his shots precise. He is faster than them, stronger than them, deadlier than them. She fires too, covering his flank, trying to keep up, trying to understand how he can move like this, how he can fight like this, without fear, without pain, without limits. The bodies pile up, but the human does not stop. He keeps pushing forward, relentless, unstoppable, a force of nature. She realizes now, with terrifying clarity, that he is not just a soldier, he is something else entirely, something the galaxy is not ready for. and she is standing right beside him. The air is thick with smoke, and the stench of burning metal bodies litter the floor. The alarms scream through the stronghold. But none of it seems to matter to the human. He moves through the chaos like it is just another day, like the fight is not something he merely survives, but something he dominates. She follows her weapon, raised her muscles tense. She has fought before, she has seen death before. But this is different. This is something else entirely. The way he moves, the way he kills, the way he does not stop, does not hesitate, does not even acknowledge pain or exhaustion. It is like he was built for this, like he was forged in war itself. More enemies rush in their boots, slamming against the metal floor, their weapons raised. But he does not slow. His rifle is already up. His shots find their marks. 1, 2, 3 bodies drop before they can even fire. She barely keeps up, forcing herself to move, forcing herself to push forward, because falling behind is not an option, not with him, not with the way he fights. They reach another corridor, the stronghold stretching ahead like a maze of death. Her heart is hammering, her pulse erratic. She spares a glance at him. He looks the same as he did when they started. No sign of strain, no sign of weakness. His breathing is steady, his hands are steady, his eyes are cold, calculating. How are you still going? She demands between breaths. How are you not even tired? He does not look at her. He does not slow down. He just shrugs. Training, she almost laughs, almost screams. That is not training, that is something else, something unnatural. But before she can say another word, he suddenly stops, his hand shooting up, signaling for silence. She freezes, her fingers tightening around her weapon, her ears straining, the sound of the alarm, the distant gunfire, the hum of the stronghold's power systems. But then she hears it too, something else, something heavier, something approaching fast. He curses under his breath. Heavy units incoming, he mutters. Her stomach drops. Heavy units, the enemy elites, armored, reinforced, faster, stronger, deadlier. Normal soldiers were bad enough. But these were different, these were executioners. We need to fall back, she says, instinct kicking in. We can't take them head on, not just the two of us. But he is already moving forward. Her blood runs cold. Are you insane? We cannot fight them head on. He glances at her for a brief moment, his expression unreadable, like he is studying her, calculating something. Then he turns away, his grip tightening around his weapon. You can run if you want. Her breath catches in her throat, something in his voice, something sharp, something final, like he expects her to leave, like he expects her to abandon the fight. And the flares inside her. She has fought too hard to get here, survived too much to turn back now. She grits her teeth, forcing the fear down, forcing herself to move forward beside him. "I'm not running," she says. He nods once, just once, then raises his weapon, and the battle begins. The heavy units appear at the end of the corridor, massive towering armor plating gleaming under the red emergency lights. Their weapons are already primed, already aimed. The first shot explodes against the wall, barely missing them. She dives to the side, rolling into cover, her heart pounding. But the human, he does not dive, he does not take cover, he sprints straight toward them. She watches in horror, her mouth opening to shout, but then she sees it. He moves too fast, too erratic. His body twists, his feet barely touching the ground. One moment, he is there, the next he is somewhere else. The shots miss him completely. He reaches the first heavy unit before it can react, slamming into it with impossible force. His knife carves through the armor like it is nothing, finding weak points. The soldier chokes, staggers, collapses before he can even scream. The second one turns, its massive arms swinging, but the human ducks, rolls, comes up behind it before it can even process his movement. His hands latch onto its helmet, and then with a sickening crack he twists. She stares as the second heavy unit crumples lifeless. This is not possible. This should not be possible. The last unit fires a desperate shot. It grazes his side, burning through fabric, searing flesh. She expects him to flinch, to stagger, to slow down, but he does not. He moves like he did not even feel it, like pain itself is irrelevant. In the span of seconds, it is over 3 heavy units, 3 of the enemy's best, and they never stood a chance. She forces herself to breathe, her hands shaking slightly, but he just straightens, rolls his shoulders, like this was nothing, like this was just another step forward. Her voice is barely a whisper. "What are you?" He finally looks at her, his expression unreadable. Human, he says, then he turns and keeps walking like that one word explains everything, and yet explains nothing at all. She watches him move through the carnage, his steps steady, his breathing controlled, like the battle never happened, like he never just tore through 3 of the enemy's strongest warriors, like he never just walked through gunfire, without flinching, without hesitation, without pain. Her mind is still struggling to process what she just saw, what she keeps seeing every time he fights, every time he moves, every time he speaks. Human, he said it like it was the simplest answer in the universe, but there is nothing simple about him, nothing normal, nothing that makes sense. She forces herself to follow, gripping her weapon tighter. Her hands are still shaking. She hates the way he looks so composed while she is still trying to calm her racing pulse. But she does not slow down. She cannot slow down, not as she wants to keep up with him, not as she wants to survive. The stronghold stretches ahead, the final sector, the command center, the heart of the enemy's operation. Take this, and the battle is over. Take this, and they win. But it is heavily fortified, armored barriers, reinforced doors, and even more soldiers waiting inside. She knows the layout, she studied the plans, she knows they should not be able to get through this alone. But she also knows by now that the word impossible does not exist to him. He stops just outside the perimeter, scanning the defenses, his eyes narrow for just a moment, calculating, assessing, then he exhales through his nose. 12 guards on the outer perimeter, turrets on both sides, reinforcements inside, he mutters. She nods, knowing there is no way they can take this with a direct assault. Even with his unnatural ability to fight through anything, it would be suicide. We need a different approach, she says, a way to cut off their defenses, disable the turrets, maybe lure the guards away. He glances at her, then tilts his head slightly. You think too much. Her frustration flares again. You say that like thinking is a bad thing. He does not argue, does not explain, he just moves. She barely has time to react before he is already advancing toward the enemy line, walking straight into their range, walking straight into the kill zone. Her breath catches. What is he doing? Before she can stop herself, she moves too, her instincts screaming at her that this is madness. But she follows anyway, because that is what she does now. She follows him into the impossible. The guards spot them, their weapons raise, but the human is faster. His rifle snaps up, his shots precise. 3 of them drop before the others even react. The turrets swivel, locking onto them. Plasma bursts streak through the air. She throws herself into cover, but he does not. He keeps moving, he keeps pushing forward. The turret locks onto him, fires. She expects him to dodge, expects him to take cover, but instead he does something worse, something impossible. He grabs the nearest body, lifts it with one arm, and hurls it straight into the turret. The impact disrupts the sensors. The plasma shot goes wide, missing him by inches. And before it can recalibrate, he is already beneath it, climbing, scaling the structure within human speed. He reaches the base, rips open a panel, and with one brutal yank tears the power cables free. The turret sparks, then dies. She stares, frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. She has seen engineers struggle for minutes to disable these things, but he just tore it apart with his bare hands. The remaining guards hesitate, their confidence shaken, and that is all it takes for him to strike. He drops from the turret, lands, rolls, and then he is among them, his knife flashing, his gunfire precise, brutal, final. Within seconds it is over. She pushes herself up, forcing her legs to move, forcing herself to join him. They reach the final door, reinforced steel inches, thick, an impenetrable barrier. She knows it is locked, knows it is coded, knows there is no way through without the proper clearance. But he just steps forward, places his hands against the metal, and with a deep breath he pushes. Her mind rejects what she is seeing, rejects the way the metal groans, bends, twists beneath his grip. And then with a final deafening crack, the door crumples inward, torn from its hinges, like it was nothing more than a piece of paper. She takes a shaky step back, her heart hammering in her chest. He turns to her, expression unreadable, then gestures toward the now open path. After you, he says, and for the first time she realizes that whatever he is, whatever humans truly are, the galaxy is not ready for them. She steps forward, her legs feel unsteady, but she forces herself to move, forces herself to follow him through the shattered doorway, because turning back is not an option, not now, not ever. The command center stretches ahead, dimly lit, filled with the hum of machines' holographic displays flickering across the walls. She grips her weapon tighter, scanning the room. But no soldiers, no reinforcements, just silence. Too easy, she mutters her instincts, screaming that something is wrong. He does not slow, does not hesitate. He moves forward, like he already knows the answer, like he has already planned 10 steps ahead. And maybe that is what terrifies her the most. As they step deeper inside, a voice crackles through the speakers, low, smooth, filled with amusement. So this is the human. She stiffens, her grip tightening. She knows that voice, the enemy commander, the one who orchestrated this war, the one responsible for the devastation, for the countless lives lost, for all of it. And now they are face to face. Or almost. A hologram's flicker shifting, forming the image of a tall figure, sharp eyes, calculating hands, clasped behind his back. He stands at the center of the room watching them. But he is not really here, just a projection, just another obstacle in their path. The human tilts his head, studying the image, his expression unreadable as always. The enemy commander chuckles, his gaze locking onto him. Fascinating, truly fascinating. You should not exist. The things you have done, the way you fight, the way you survive it, is unnatural, impossible. And yet here you are, defying logic, defying reason. The human does not respond, does not blink, just waits. She swallows hard, trying to ignore the cold feeling creeping up her spine. The enemy commander is not panicked, is not afraid. He should be, but he is not. And that is what worries her more than anything. Tell me, human, the commander continues, taking a slow step forward. How far do you think you can go? How many enemies do you think you can cut down before your body finally breaks, before you finally reach your limit? The human exhales through his nose, almost like a laugh. The commander smirks, amused. I have studied your kind. I have seen the way your bodies tear themselves apart, just to keep moving, just to keep fighting. Remarkable, but ultimately flawed. You push beyond your limits, but eventually those limits catch up to you. Eventually, the body fails, the mind shatters. And then what will you be then? Nothing more than a broken tool. Her fists clench. She wants to shoot the hologram, wants to wipe that smug expression from his face. But it would do nothing, and she knows it. The human simply rolls his shoulder, cracking his neck, like he is bored, like none of this matters. Then he finally speaks. You talk too much. The commander's smirk falters just for a second, but then he laughs. Oh, you are truly something else. But it does not matter, you are already too late. The room shifts, lights flicker, doors slam shut, security systems activating around them. The air hums with energy, the sound of power surging through hidden circuits. And then the floor trembles beneath them. She stumbles, her heart racing. What is happening? The commander folds his hands behind his back, as if pleased. The station's core is set to overload. It will detonate in 5 minutes, taking you, me, and everything else with a fitting end. Don't you think? A battlefield consumed in fire. Her breath catches. 5 minutes. They have 5 minutes to escape, 5 minutes to survive. But the way the human stands, the way he does not even react, it is like he already expected this, like it is just another obstacle to crush beneath his feet. The commander watches him closely, eyes narrowing. You do not seem concerned. The human steps forward, his movements slow, controlled, and for the first time she sees something in his expression, something she has not seen before, a smile. Not a smirk, not amusement, something colder, something sharper, something that makes the commander straighten just slightly, like he finally understands. The human speaks, voice low, steady. I don't break. And then he moves. Before she can react, before the commander can even register the danger, he is already at the control panel, tearing through the systems, his fingers moving faster than her eyes, can follow wires, snap sparks, fly security locks, disengage alarms, blare in protest. But it does not matter. Nothing stops him, nothing slows him. The commander's expression shifts, realization dawning. This is not a man who fights without reason. This is not a soldier driven by instinct alone. This is something else, something worse, something unstoppable. You think you have won, the commander starts, but his voice is weaker now, less certain. The human does not look at him, he just rips out the final circuit, slamming his fist against the console, and suddenly the alarms stop, the energy hum fades, the countdown halts at 2 minutes remaining. Silence. She exhales, shaking her head, unable to process what just happened. The commander stares, expression unreadable, then slowly he smiles. Fascinating, truly fascinating. You are not a soldier, you are something else entirely. The human finally looks at him, his expression unreadable. "I know." And with that he turns, walking away, not sparing the commander another glance, because the fight is over, the war is over, and humanity does not break. She follows him through the shattered doorway, through the dim corridors of the stronghold, her breath still unsteady, her hands still trembling from everything she just witnessed. The alarms have stopped. The station is no longer moments away from destruction, but the battle, the war, the truth of what she just saw, none of it has settled, none of it feels real. The human moves ahead of her, his pace steady, unfazed, unstoppable, like none of it mattered, like he had not just ripped through an entire army, like he had not just disabled a doomsday device with his bare hands, like he had not just rewritten the rules of war itself. The enemy commander is gone, his hologram vanished without a trace, but his final words still linger. Fascinating, truly fascinating. He had said them with amusement, but she heard something else, something deeper, something colder, something like fear. She is afraid too. Not of him, never of him, but of what he represents, of what he is, of what his kind truly means for the galaxy. They reach the outer edge of the station, the docking bay, where their extraction ship waits, hovering just beyond the magnetic field. Her team is there waiting, staring at the wreckage of the stronghold, at the bodies, at the devastation. They look at her first, searching for answers. But then they see him, and their expressions shift from confusion to something else, something like awe, something like fear. "Are we clear?" the pilot asks through the comms, his voice tight, urgent. She hesitates, glancing back at the station, at the corridors that now sit silent, filled only with the echoes of the battle that had raged here moments ago. She looks at the human who stands at the edge of the platform, gazing out at the endless stars, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," she says, "finally we are clear." The docking ramp lowers, they step on board, the engines flare to life, and then they are gone, the station shrinking behind them, disappearing into the void left behind, as nothing more than a ruined monument to a battle that should have been impossible to win. The flight is silent, no one speaks, no one dares. Every soldier in the cabin shifts uneasily, their eyes flicking toward the human, their minds struggling to comprehend what they just saw, what they just survived. He does not look at them, does not acknowledge the way they stare. He simply sits, arms crossed, gaze distant, like he is already thinking about the next fight, the next war, the next impossible battle he will undoubtedly walk into and out of without a scratch. Finally, someone breaks the silence. "What the hell are you?" It is whispered, but loud enough that it cuts through the tension, loud enough that everyone hears, loud enough that she feels the weight of the question settle over them all. He does not answer, not at first. His fingers flex, slightly, his knuckles still bruised from the fight, but then he speaks, voice quiet, steady, final, "Human." Just one word, and yet it is heavier than anything else, heavier than all the bodies left behind, heavier than the entire war, heavier than the way the galaxy itself will have to shift to understand what it truly means. She exhales, staring at him, and for the first time she understands. This war had been about territory, about power, about control. The enemy had thought they were fighting another species, another empire, another obstacle to conquer. But they had been wrong. They were fighting something new, something different, something terrifying. They were fighting humans. And humans do not break, they do not stop, they do not fear, they do not lose. The silence stretches thick, heavy. No one speaks, no one knows what to say. Then the pilot's voice crackles through the comms. "Approaching fleet, inbound friendly signals. They got our message, they're moving in to secure the sector." Relief washes through her. It is over, truly over. But as she looks at the human sitting across from her, as she remembers the way he fought, the way he survived, the way he tore through everything in his path, she knows this was only the beginning. The galaxy is not ready for them, but it will learn, because humanity has arrived.